I'm a locksmith with 26 years spent mastering how mechanisms align, how pieces connect, and above all, how to detect the slightest sign of interference. My name is Thomas. At 51, I've built a thriving security company that has provided my family with everything they ever required. But one ordinary Wednesday morning in March, I discovered something out of place in my wife's car, and in an instant, those decades of noticing subtle mismatches revealed that my marriage was on the verge of collapse. Her wedding band lay in the cup holder of her Honda, casually resting there as if it belonged. In 23 years together, Melissa had never once removed that ring. She kept it on through showers, while cooking, even when she painted our bedroom 5 years earlier and ended up with paint splattered across it. Yet now it sat abandoned like loose change. I stood frozen in the driveway, clutching that ring, my mind racing to find a rational explanation, something straightforward that would restore order. Her car wasn't meant to be home. She departed for work at her regular hour, kissed me farewell as usual, mentioned grabbing groceries later, and I'd seen her reverse out at 7:30. The same routine she'd followed for 8 years, since joining the medical supply firm downtown. But the previous night after dinner at her sister's, I'd left my phone in her car. Around 9:00, I went to retrieve it and found her Honda parked there, doors unlocked. My phone remained in the side pocket, untouched. As I reached for it, my eyes landed on the ring and my hand froze midair. It wasn't concealed or carefully placed. It was simply dropped there, perhaps removed absent-mindedly. Or maybe taken off with the intention of putting it back on, only to be forgotten. I lifted it, feeling its familiar weight, the same band I'd scrimped and saved for 3 months to purchase when I was 26, juggling 2 jobs. That ring had adorned her finger longer than our son Logan had been alive. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table for perhaps 20 minutes, staring at it, constructing possible scenarios. Maybe her fingers had swollen. Maybe she'd handled something messy at work and removed it to avoid damage. Maybe she'd visited somewhere and feared losing it. But her job at the medical supply office involved answering calls and handling orders, no tasks that demanded removing jewelry. And even if there had been, she would have tucked it safely in her purse, not left it exposed in the cup holder for anyone to notice. I've never been the suspicious or jealous sort. Still, I recognize when something is seriously out of place, and that ring belonged nowhere except on her finger. When Melissa returned that evening carrying grocery bags, chatting about the crowded store and bumping into a book club acquaintance, her words halted the moment she spotted me in the living room, with the ring displayed on the coffee table. "What's that doing here?" she asked. I studied her expression the way I examine a client's face when revealing their lock has been tampered with. "You tell me," I replied, voice steady. She laughed, actually laughed, set the bags down and said, "Oh my God, Thomas, I stopped by that new gym on Riverside before work. The one Claire recommended. I didn't want to risk losing it in the locker, so I left it in the car and forgot to put it back on." She approached, picked up the ring, slipped it onto her finger as though the entire incident were trivial, kissed my forehead, and went to unpack the groceries. I sat motionless, chest tightening, not because I fully disbelieved her, but because I'd driven past Riverside Avenue twice that week for client visits. There was no new gym, just the same dry cleaner and insurance agency that had occupied those spots for years. I stayed quiet. I nodded, assisted with the groceries, cooked dinner together as usual, watched TV and went to bed. But sleep evaded me. Lying beside her, listening to her steady breathing, I understood for the first time in 23 years that my wife had lied to me. Not a harmless fib to spare feelings, but a carefully crafted story to conceal something. At 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed, went to my office and scrolled to Victor's contact. Victor and I shared a long history, installations together before I launched my own company. 10 years earlier, he'd become a private investigator, mostly handling corporate and insurance matters, though he took on personal cases too. I stared at his name for ages before texting to ask if we could speak the next day. Sending it felt like unlocking a door that would never shut again. I returned to bed and remained awake until dawn, realizing this might be a puzzle no tool of mine could solve. The instant you choose investigation over direct confrontation, you've already conceded that trust has vanished. Victor phoned the following morning while I drove to a job. His tone carried the caution of someone stepping into complicated territory. "Thomas, I saw your message." "What's happening?" I explained the ring, the non-existent Jim, the instinct screaming that something was deeply wrong. He stayed silent a long while before responding. "Listen, I've been in this line for a decade. Before we proceed, hear me. Once you start digging, you can't erase what you uncover." "Are you certain you want the answers?" I tightened my grip on the wheel as the light changed to green. "Yes," I said. "The uncertainty is worse than any truth." He agreed to meet that afternoon at a quiet coffee shop near my office. When I arrived, he waited in a rear corner, folder ready, appearing more worn than I recalled. Victor explained plainly. He could tail her, capture photos, build a record, but it required money and time, likely a week or two to confirm any pattern. Alternatively, I could begin with a small GPS tracker myself. He demonstrated how to attach it and monitor via phone. "If she's going places she shouldn't, you'll see it quickly," he said, sliding a compact magnetic device across the table. "Then call me for the full surveillance, photos, timestamps, lawyer-ready proof." I took the tracker, noting its surprising lightness, this small object that might preserve my marriage or destroy it, and said I'd decide soon. That night, once Melissa slept, I crept to the driveway and secured the device beneath her Honda, behind the rear wheel well, an invisible spot. I installed the app and watched the blue dot appear, motionless in our driveway. The next morning, the dot traveled from home to downtown, settling in the parking garage beside her office building. It remained all day. I felt a strange blend of relief and letdown. Perhaps I'd overreacted, perhaps paranoia had taken hold. But Friday shifted everything. The dot followed the usual route downtown until 10:30 a.m., then moved again. While installing locks at a dental practice, I watched it head across town, away from her workplace, away from familiar shops or eateries. Stopping at Murphy's Diner, a spot she'd never mentioned in 23 years. It lingered there for 1 hour and 40 minutes. My hands trembled so violently I had to pause work and sit in my van, staring at the screen, silently begging the dot to return to her office, pleading for a harmless reason. I completed the job and drove directly to Murphy's Diner, though the dot had already returned downtown. I parked outside the modest building, red vinyl booths visible through the glass, struggling to comprehend why my wife would spend midday there. The weekend dragged painfully. She stayed home. We carried on normally. We even took Logan to an early birthday dinner despite his actual date being a week away. All the while, I felt like an actor in a flawed performance, the only one aware the lines were wrong. Monday, the dot went straight to work and stayed. I began hoping Friday had been isolated, perhaps a friend meeting, perhaps innocent. Tuesday repeated the pattern, 10:30 a.m. direct to Murphy's Diner. This time I prepared. I told my assistant about a family emergency, climbed into my van and drove there, pulse hammering. I parked 3 spaces from her Honda and waited. At 12:15, the door swung open. Melissa emerged, but not alone. A tall man, around 40, in business casual attire accompanied her. They stood by her car, conversing briefly. Then he leaned in and kissed her. Not a casual peck, but a genuine embrace, his hand on her lower back, hers on his chest. I watched through my windshield, feeling detached, as if viewing someone else's story unfold. They parted. She entered her car, he walked to a silver Audi 2 spots away. I remained motionless until both vehicles left, then scribbled his license plate on a glove-box napkin with a nearly dry pen. I didn't head home. I drove aimlessly for 2 hours, passing the elementary school where we'd once collected Logan together, remembering how we'd functioned as partners, how I'd trusted her completely. When I finally returned, she was preparing dinner and greeted me with a smile, asking about my day. "Busy," I answered. She described hers as draining, endless paperwork, her boss introducing frustrating new rules, barely time for lunch. I nodded, helped set the table, ate beside her, and observed her deliver the same lies with the familiar face she'd worn for 2 decades. I realized I no longer knew this woman at all. That night from my van in the driveway, I phoned Victor and described what I'd witnessed. He sighed deeply. "Okay, send the plate. I'll identify him and we'll gather proper evidence. You'll need clear photos, dates, everything solid for court." Over the following 2 weeks, Victor trailed her. Images arrived. Melissa and the man, Stephen, meeting at the diner at a highway hotel, his hand consistently on her back, her laughing at his words. One Thursday afternoon, Victor texted, "Glenwood, room 237. Inside for 90 minutes. I sat in my office staring at the screen until the emotional chaos inside me simply switched off, leaving only the calm, methodical part that diagnoses broken locks and determines precise solutions. The next Monday, I met attorney Elaine, bringing every piece. GPS records, photographs, Victor's detailed timeline covering at least 6 weeks, likely more. She reviewed it all on her desk and peered at me over her glasses. "Your wife has been sloppy, Mr. Thomas, and you've been meticulous. This is more than sufficient." She outlined the divorce process in our state, asset division, custody considerations, though Logan, at 19, needed none, and how documented infidelity could influence alimony and property outcomes. I listened as she treated my marriage like a contract nearing termination, and understood that's precisely what it had become. Leaving her office after 2 hours, I knew my next steps clearly. It was time for the concluding phase, and Melissa remained unaware. Documentation safeguards more than finances. It protects the person who kept composure when emotions threatened to ruin everything built. Over 3 days, I transferred funds carefully. Not everything, just enough for security during the transition, moving money from joint accounts to my business account under my sole control, disguising movements as routine operating expenses. Elaine had specified legal boundaries, and I remained within them. I quietly removed personal belongings from the house, my grandfather's watch, my mother's few heirloom pieces, family documents and photos, and stored them in boxes at my office unit. Logan was away at college 3 hours north, finishing sophomore year. I felt thankful he wasn't witnessing this, though I dreaded the eventual conversation with him more than anything. On a Saturday morning in early April, I woke at 5:00 and lay beside Melissa one final time, observing her sleep. I searched for rage, grief, anything, but felt only that same detached stillness that had taken root weeks earlier. I showered, dressed, and moved through the house slowly, taking in 23 years of shared existence. Vacation photos on walls, furniture we'd chosen, paint shades we'd debated. It all resembled an exhibit from another couple's life. I'd loaded clothing and essentials into my van the previous night, parking it 2 streets away to avoid suspicion. Now only the final communication remained. I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen table beside an envelope holding copies of all evidence. The photos, GPS data, hotel receipts Victor secured. The timeline, plus a single page with Elaine's contact details and a brief note. Your affair with Stephen is fully documented. My attorney will contact you. Do not attempt to reach me. I wrote no declarations of love, no expressions of heartbreak. Just facts the way I'd itemize a lock replacement invoice. I departed at 6:15 a.m., snapped my SIM card in half, discarded it in a gas station bin, and activated a new phone number and email shared only with Logan, Victor, and Elaine. I'd booked an extended stay hotel 40 minutes away, distant enough to avoid chance encounters, near enough to run my business. The strategy was straightforward. Become unreachable, allow attorneys to manage proceedings, avoid all emotional exchanges or justifications. Elaine had cautioned that Melissa would attempt contact, offer explanations, perhaps even portray me as the wrongdoer. Silence, she advised, was the strongest response. Let evidence stand alone. Victor later related that Melissa returned around 2 p.m. from shopping, discovered the envelope and ring, and per a neighbor he casually questioned, erupted in screams audible through walls. She tried my number, heard it disconnected. She drove to my office, found it closed with a note redirecting emergencies to my assistant. She contacted my brother in Florida, whom I'd prepped. He delivered my scripted reply. I was safe, needed distance, and she should speak to my lawyer. Victor mentioned she'd hired her own investigator to locate me. But I'd planned carefully, cash payments, no social media, no visits to familiar areas. The divorce concluded in 4 months, all through lawyers. With the evidence undeniable, Melissa contested little. The house sold and proceeds divided. I retained the business, established before marriage and kept separate. No alimony due to the infidelity clause Elaine included. 3 weeks after I left, Logan called, the toughest discussion of my life. In a hotel room, I explained to my son why his parents' marriage ended, why I'd vanished without notice. "Dad, why not tell me first?" he asked. I explained the risk. Any advance word might reach his mother prematurely. I avoided criticizing Melissa, presented facts, shared evidence when he requested, and gave him space to absorb it. He felt anger initially, at both of us. Me for the sudden exit, her for the betrayal. Eventually, he comprehended. When holidays required choosing, he chose me. That answered everything. 2 years post-divorce, I purchased a modest home in a town 30 minutes from our old life, convenient for work, distant enough for renewal. I dated casually, testing whether connection remained possible without expecting deceit. Then, in a community woodworking class, I met Hannah, a teacher, divorced 5 years prior, no children. We began chatting over coffee after one session. It felt natural, uncomplicated, free of pretense. We progressed slowly. After 8 months, I recognized real happiness again. Not mere stability, but genuine joy in daily life. 5 years after leaving that ring on the table, Logan became engaged to a woman from grad school. They chose a small vineyard wedding in the town where Hannah and I lived, a place Logan had grown fond of during a prior visit. On the wedding day, standing with Hannah near the entrance welcoming guests, I spotted Melissa arriving with her sister. She appeared aged, more worn, as if the intervening years had been harsh. Our gazes met across the courtyard. Her face drained of color, not merely from seeing me, she'd anticipated that, but from seeing me beside Hannah, in a well-fitted suit I'd never owned during our marriage, smiling authentically. Having rebuilt a meaningful life. Logan had shared that she'd married Stephen 2 years after our divorce, only for it to end in 18 months. She'd remained single since, still in an apartment near her sister, still at the same job. Hannah gently squeezed my hand, asking if I was all right. I realized I truly was. Melissa's appearance stirred nothing. She was simply another attendee, a distant acquaintance from long ago. At the reception, Logan drew me aside, thanked me for handling everything calmly 5 years earlier, for never speaking ill of his mother, for creating a better future instead of dwelling in pain. He said observing my response had taught him more about true strength than anything else. I embraced my son, watched him dance with his bride, glanced at Hannah laughing among guests, and reflected on that March morning when one misplaced ring unraveled everything, yet also liberated me from a relationship already over, though I'd been unaware. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't clinging to what's toxic, but stepping away and constructing something stronger. Watching my son begin his own marriage, surrounded by sincere love, confirmed I'd chosen correctly. The true triumph lay not in what was abandoned, but in demonstrating that leaving ruin behind opens the path to preserving what truly matters. Would you have approached this the same way, or would you have confronted Melissa directly before leaving? What are your thoughts on this story? Share below in the comments. Like if it resonated, and subscribe for more true life accounts.